Welcome to week 7 here at George Washington University School of Professional Studies, Political Violence and Terrorism. Just a couple announcements. Everyone's gotten paper 2 back. I think most people did a pretty good job. Just a couple of the issues that came up again. Specificity is key. If you're talking about sarin gas, you need to know things like shelf life, binary versus unitary, precursor materials. Those are issues that deal with the employment, the transportation, how to actually effectively deploy or in a potential terrorist attack. So you need to get down to those specifics. For plague, some of you did that. You need to talk about R rates and transmission rates. And is this something like the coronavirus? Those specificities are key in this paper. But most of you, again, did pretty well. Again, as I mentioned, you got to talk about the impact of the science. How does the science inhibit or make it more effective or more likely? And then finally, think of the coronavirus. Think back March 2020. I know that seems like ages ago, but in March 2020, people in your position had to explain to governors and local leaders and federal leaders what transmission rates are of coronavirus, who's the most vulnerable, how it transmissions, what we can do and can't do. The public officials, have to communicate that to the population in simple, understandable language. So the whole point of this is to make sure something as complicated as sarin or plague or ricin, make it so your boss can explain to the public, this is what we need to worry about, this is what we don't need to worry about, this is how we can make sure everything is calm. So there'll always be another virus coming down the pipeline. Think about how to communicate and how to publicly give those issues for something like that. So week 6 review. Are we more secure since 9/11? We've invested billions, trillions, depending on how you count it. And that's one of the goals of this quarter, where this was to actually ask, as well as the Brill article that you guys read about, is that money worthwhile? Are we more secure? Or is the threat evolved? Again, 9/11 was, if you remember back then, international terrorism with large conspiracies. Perhaps we've done a good job in making sure that type of threat isn't around. What we're seeing now, I mean, you see all these attacks from lone wolves, right-wing extremists, Islamic extremists, whatever, but those aren't very organized, because it's very hard to do an organized, international, multifaceted terrorist attack like 9/11 because of everything that we have implemented. Now, you can talk about whether it's worth it, whether it's most effective, how effective it is. But again, a 9/11-like attack is a lot more difficult. I always ask this question, what do you do? You saw that in the documentary, Bin Laden Determined to Attack in the U.S. So let's say the president goes back to you and says, okay, what do you want me to do? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. What do I do? Do I stop all aviation? Do I invade Afghanistan? Do I, my point of that is, when you're going to brief a senior leader, especially something like as vague as Bin Laden Determined to Attack in the U.S., I think you have to have a set of recommendations in mind that mitigate it. And that allows the policymaker or the operations or operator or military leader or whoever you're briefing to be able to bracket the problem. Now, they may not, if you're intel and you brief that, they don't have to listen to you. They don't have to do what you say. But if you give a set of recommendations or have it in the back of your head what the operator can do or the policymaker can do, that will make your analysis flow a little bit easier. Was 9/11 intelligence failure? You saw my comments in the PowerPoint. Was it an intelligence failure? Maybe. Not everything that is bad is an intelligence failure. But then I also argue, as you saw in my lecture, we had information on the 9/11 hijackers before they conducted the attack on 9/11. According to the NSA documentary, we actually had intercepted communications between them and a known bin Laden safe house. We had that information in our government, but because of bureaucracy, because of information issues, that couldn't be shared with the people that could actually do something about it. So in that case, I think it is an intelligence failure, but you guys can make your own in your own minds. Then we go to the post 9/11 case studies. Fort Hood shooting. This is always a case. How do we check radicalization? And we all have seen the radicalization cycle with ability to monitor or ability to do something. And that's not just the Fort Hood shooting. That's lone wolves in general and other entities. How do we monitor for radicalization? How do we put people on watch list? At what point do we put someone on watch list? Do we put someone on watch list because they're Islamic extremism a lot more than we put people with watch lists that are right-wing extremism? And then finally, what do we do when they're on watch lists? For those of you who don't know, in the Capitol Hill attack, there were people on the terrorism screening database that went to that rally and were in attendance and stormed the Capitol. They were known. They were on the radar of law enforcement, yet we still couldn't do anything. Why? Is it just because we live in a free country? Or is it something else? Do we have the appropriate funding, structures, and personnel? Again, when we start talking about these distributed terrorist attacks, lone wolves, self-radicalized people, do we need to change the laws? Maybe be more intrusive? Or should we not? Or do we just accept it? And that brings me up to my last question. Is there always going to be low-level attacks? Do we just have to maybe accept that in a society that is free, that a society that, I don't want to say fetishizes guns, but maybe that is a good way of saying it, that we fetishize guns, that you'll always have school shootings and Orlandos and others, that we just have to accept that. I'll let you decide whether that's acceptable. And then I talked earlier about the intelligence versus the policy when I talked about bin Laden determined to attack in the U.S. So week 7, is leadership targeting more strategy or just a tactic? Under what circumstances is it effective? As you go through the readings, ask yourself those questions. And then we look at the second part. What are the conditions that have led to Islamic radicalism in the U.S. since 2009? What has led to right-wing extremism? So that's a preview for week 7. And then week 8, we're going to cover the right-wing extremism in a little bit more detail. So I look forward to any questions and issues you have. And if there are any issues, please let me know.